what is happening in the conversations you're having at leadership level in terms of mindset shifts? What are people doing? Like regarding what Kevin said, how are people talking about thinking about the problem differently now?
I think the pandemic has been a rude awakening. I have friends who've lost jobs. I know people, and I feel for them, and genuinely feel for them. And it's not easy for businesses, for home businesses, and so on and so forth. So it is a tough scenario. But digital transformation, because of the pandemic, now has become an existential imperative, and there are many examples that demonstrate that. But it took a pandemic for everyone to realize that. What was worrying for me listening to Kevin, which I agree with what he said, but the worry part for me is everyone's talking about the future, but are we ensuring that we're learning from the past so that we don't repeat the past in the future, right? And one of my mentors just a couple of days ago shared this quote with me. It says, "Life can be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards." It's a Danish philosopher, Soren Kierkegaard. Very, very nicely said. So if organizations don't start building a learning culture, confronting their brutal realities, it's going to be very hard to actually build strategies for the future because you're going to inevitably repeat the same mistakes. So it's going to be super important to have that learning culture and to actually say, hey, what do we need to do differently? What did we do in the past that didn't set us up well for what's happening right now? The ground under us is constantly shifting, and that's a realization we all must come to terms with, not just for businesses but for individuals as well. So I think more and more with the pandemic, we see organizations trying to figure out what business continuity looks like. How do they connect with customers? How do they continue to engage with even employees? What should leadership look like in a pandemic? And I think you can see different examples across the globe of CEOs responding in different ways. And so I think these are some of the things that organizations now need to grapple with as they go forward. But I think it needs to start with making sure that we don't repeat the past. And that's something that I'm concerned of, because it's important for us to learn, and it's important for us to ensure that behaviors change as we go forward. Because in some markets like China, which has now pretty much started to open up, I heard from a colleague who was flying from Shanghai to Beijing that the flights were full this last week. And the pandemic wasn't really in China not long ago. So have people necessarily changed their behaviors or adapted, or are people going back to the old norms and carrying on the same way they used to do things? And I think that's going to be something that needs to get visited by every organization and leadership as they kind of think about the future and build forward.